The process for creating the virtual Paul's Cross project was really quite lengthy and involved a large number of participants and experts in different fields to put it all together. But preceding the model, or both models, because we ended up actually making two, one digital model for sound and one digital model for visuals. And preceding these models, we really needed to gather the most accurate source documentation. So we used things like John Gipkin's painting from the 1600s to really understand the atmosphere, the colors, the materiality, the inhabitation of the space. We also used Sir Christopher Wren's drawings because Wren was planning to do a renovation of St. Paul's before it burned. And so we derived a lot of vertical information, the elevations, the dimensions, and so forth, from his drawings. We also used current plans that were produced by John Schofield, the archaeologist at current St. Paul's. And we used his surveys of old St. Paul's to really understand accuracy in plan. And we also had a few other drawings that gave us the outline of the Paul's Cross preaching station and several other engravings, including those from Holler. Using these source materials, we then translated the information into our own two-dimensional digital drawings, primarily using programs like AutoCAD. We redrew the plans, we redrew the sections of the cathedral, we redrew elevations, and then we started to translate that into three-dimensional form using software that is common to architects, even practicing architects now, things like SketchUp, 3D Studio from Autodesk, and then to further develop the visuals, we used V-Ray, a program for rendering three-dimensional models, and Photoshop, of course, following that. While the visual model contains a lot of detail, including the materials of the church, the atmosphere around the church, it shows people inhabiting the courtyard, and things of that nature, the sound model that we use for the recording purposes was a much reduced three-dimensional digital model. The geometry of the audio model is much simplified when compared to the geometry of the visual model. And so we sent this audio model, the reduced version, to a Syntec in Boston, where they could insert the sounds that we recorded in England into the digital space, so we really understand the acoustics, the materiality that it produces, that the church produces, the sounds, how they echo, how they vibrate, how they reflect off of the surfaces, to give us a really accurate rendition of perhaps what John Donne would have sounded like delivering his sermon. Now, getting the sounds to project into the digital space was also an interesting aspect of the project. We relied on the father and son team of David Crystal and Ben Crystal to produce the sermon for us. David, the father, is a linguist and helped us with the pronunciation of the sermon pieces. And Ben, his son, is a Shakespearean actor, and he was the one who recorded the sermon for us in an anechoic chamber. This was all taking place in England, while the modeling of the cathedral itself was taking place back in Raleigh, North Carolina, in the States. Now, bringing these two things together at a Syntec, Ben Markham and Matt Azevedo put together the two, the architectural model and the sound recordings, to produce the final product for us. The process of simulating the acoustic properties in a historic space is quite involved, and we did run into quite a few different difficulties. Overall, we were able to work through them with given the expertise of the team, and it's important to point out that that team, probably the biggest thing to overcome is that each person plays a significant role. So we brought together several disciplines of people, including those of us from architecture, those from sound engineering backgrounds and expertise, the Crystals with linguistics and acting, and of course the studio recording, and all of these things require a great degree of expertise. That's not to mention the historical expertise that's provided to us by John Wall and of course John Schofield. We're indebted really quite deeply to our graduate students in architecture who were capable of reading the source material and understanding it, and then being able to translate that into the three-dimensional virtual models for us. We were very fortunate that John Wall on the project really acted as a great conductor, organizing the different groups of people, because I would say that was the largest challenge. It's not so difficult to work within your own discipline, say for me and my graduate students, to produce digital models of architecture. That's what we do on a day-to-day basis. But then to be able to share those files in a format and in a useful way to others, including sound engineers, that's something that was a real challenge, and understanding the file types and how they prefer to work, and the ways that we could sort of collaborate together to get the best product. Those were the real challenges. But I think that's, again, where we were very fortunate to have John Wall, who was the real go-between between all of the players in the project, and really made it run quite smoothly. We really had a great team for this project, starting at the very top with John Wall, who is really the one who dreamed up this project and started to assemble the different players. And I'm just very fortunate that John called me one day and asked to really go over this project with me, and I was excited about it from the first time we met. Now, all that's to say, he and I were directing the project, but really the ones from an architectural point of view, the ones who really did most of the work were Joshua Stevens, a graduate student in architecture who has now moved on to practice, and also Jordan Gray, another architecture student in the College of Design here at NC State University. He has also since graduated and moved on to architectural practice. But in addition to those guys, Ben Markham and Matt Acevedo, our sound engineers at Ascentech in Boston, were extremely helpful and critical to the success of the project. Their technical expertise is really unmatched in their field. Beyond that, John Schofield provided us guidance each step of the way. His historical knowledge of St. Paul's is unparalleled, and it was his advice and his feedback along the way with the model building and the work that we were doing that was really, really quite important to me and to the success of the project. Now, there were so many other players in this as well. I've mentioned the father and son team of Ben and David Crystal and how they produced the recordings for us, but there's also a large staff at NC State's Hunt Library who contributed to the exhibition of this project. And Scott Williams, for one, Mike Nutt, who helped us with a lot of our videography, and Morris York, who really was in charge of helping us to prepare our exhibition for the Hunt Library's Teaching and Visualization Lab. We were also very fortunate to have the help of two other architecture students, Craig Johnson, who was in charge of our website production, and also Chelsea Sachs, who helped us with a lot of our graphic design work. All in all, this was a really fantastic team, a team that gave above and beyond what we expected this project to take to produce, and I'm really grateful for each and every one of them. I'm not sure we can point to any one technical aspect of the project as challenging us the most. We did have several moments along the way where we thought, wow, this is a difficult part of the project, and most of that occurred when we were crossing disciplinary boundaries, again, where we were sharing files with the sound engineers for them to use and fine-tuning those files so that they were useful to them. That was a particular challenge. But I think in each case, it's the professional expertise that's developed among each of the experts working on the team that, it's hard to put together a team, to find a good team that can work together from these different disciplines. I think we were able to do that, but this is certainly a project that requires a deep understanding of architecture, of architectural history, of sound engineering, of voice recording, and things of that nature to come together. So while I can't point to any one specific thing and say that was a huge technical challenge, that's mostly because we were working with experts in the field who really knew what they were doing. Like any project, just getting started sometimes is the most difficult thing, and I do recall just sifting through the source files, the drawings, the paintings, the engravings, the historical records, and talking back and forth with John Wall and John Schofield, and also working with the graduate students to try to make the models as accurately as possible. And I would say, that may or may not represent a technical challenge. It was certainly one of the things that tested us most in working with this project. So there are some documents that are quite clear and contain quite a bit of information, while others leave things out, or others represent things in a manner that we know is probably not exactly true historically. So we really had to develop an understanding of what we could rely on in terms of documentation of the church and what we should probably put aside. Again, this is where Schofield and Wall were really the leaders of the project, and those of us who know a bit about architectural history and a lot about architectural modeling could follow their lead and translate those drawings into three-dimensional digital form. The question of what would we change if we were to do this again is actually a really good one, and one that we're thinking about currently because we are doing this project again. Um, Rather than moving on to a different cathedral, we are completing St. Paul's. We're now working on the structures that completely surrounded St. Paul's, and we're also working on the interior spaces so that we can gain an even greater understanding of the space inside. So what are we doing differently this time? Well, we have taken on more local help, local meaning to Raleigh, North Carolina, where John Wall and I are stationed, in terms of the acoustics. And so we've been challenged by others mostly to come up with a way of acoustical modeling that perhaps is open source or that is more available to researchers without that great level of expertise. There are some other things that are just hard to get around, though, in terms of the difficulty of the project. And so for the most part, I would say we'd probably do most of the things the same way the second time. I will say, though, that having an anechoic chamber more local would be a great benefit to us. Now, that said, I think the process worked quite well for us, and I'm looking forward to moving ahead with the next phase of the project, feeling fairly confident that the methods that we've established, the processes and so forth, are reliable and quite accurate, and that they can be replicated. So I'm looking forward to the next steps.